You have to make it real. It's not just about the science or the medicine itself. It's more about the impact that you can have.
Gilead Sciences is known for speed. Its COVID-19 antiviral received FDA approval in under 6 months, making it the first COVID treatment to hit the market. More recently, Gilead has begun shipping HIV prevention shots to developing countries, swiftly delivering drugs only months after approval. But Big Pharma has a big trust problem. Recent polls rank pharma as one of the most negatively viewed industries in the US, and public trust has been pulled down by high prices, accessibility issues, and misinformation. Johanna Mercier, Gilead Sciences' Chief Commercial and Corporate Affairs Officer, wants to rewrite that narrative.
I find it a little frustrating sometimes because we should tell our story better.
Can Gilead balance innovation with consumer confidence? I'm Ruth Umoh, and this is Fortune Next to Lead. Johanna Mercier, Chief Commercial Officer and Corporate Affairs Officer at Gilead Sciences, thank you so much for joining us on Fortune Next to Lead.
Thanks, Ruth, for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Absolutely. Well, Johanna, I wanted to talk with you now because your role feels like a preview of where executive leadership is headed. You're not only responsible for commercial growth at Gilead, you're also helping shape how the company shows up with governments, with policymakers, and the public at a moment when business performance and public trust are really deeply intertwined. You have experience across markets, across functions, across some of the biggest issues facing healthcare today. So we're going to talk about the future of biopharma, but also about the future of leadership itself. And you're certainly well equipped to do just that. So let's start with your job itself. What exactly does a chief commercial officer own inside a company like Gilead?
The role is really around business strategy, execution, and most importantly, access. The work that Gilead does is really around developing, discovering innovative medicines for highest unmet medical needs. But if we do all that and never get it to the patients who need it the most, then we've failed. And so the opportunity within the commercial corporate affairs role is really working with the ecosystem to work through it to make sure that people have access to these innovative medicines as they come to market. So it's an exciting role and one that right now with the recent launch about a year ago of our HIV prevention drug, lenacapavir, it's been an incredible journey to be part of something so much bigger and to potentially have an opportunity to end the HIV epidemic. This is really the right tools, the right catalyst to be able to do just that, an epidemic that's been going on for over 45 years now. And I do think that with our partners, we are the right team to be able to do just that.
No leadership role is easy, and it's all the more challenging when you have the weight of bringing to market medicines that are truly life or death. Before we dig into all that comes with that, I want to talk about your personal operating system and how you think about leadership. You recently said that in a global role, managing time is a losing battle and that you focused instead on managing energy. What do you mean by that? And when did you realize that energy was a more useful metric than time?
That's really the way I think about it because a lot of people talk about work-life balance. Work is part of life. And so I'm not sure I think about it quite like that. I do think about it, though, as a little bit about important to manage the energy that you have because certain activities or meetings or tasks will take energy away from you and you just got to feed it back. So I think about it like a piggy bank and pennies in the piggy bank. And so as the pennies come out, you got to fill it back in. And there's a lot of things at work that do energize me as well. And how do you fill that back up? And so for me, the time piece, it's not a 9 to 5 job, right? You're on all the time. And so it's more about what creates that energy for you.
So let's say you're describing your own personal energy audit. Within the professional field or professional lens, what's energy adding? What is energy depleting as you think about tasks?
I get the opportunity to go meet with the teams and hear what they're doing and share best practices and hear about their strategies and support those strategies, remove barriers for them. That's my job. And that gives me energy. When I see the teams coming together, the cross functional nature of the teams, and seeing what they can do, what they can accomplish, and delivering for patients, that's energizing, right? Our mission at Gilead is so clear of what we are trying to do. And that's really, those unmet medical needs. It's about trying to get to cures, and that's incredibly challenging. But when you hear those patient stories, when you hear the impact that you are having, that's energizing. That's what gets me up every day.
Well, you studied biology, you later earned an MBA, so it's perfect that you're sitting at this intersection. Have you always felt more like a scientist in business or a business leader in science?
That's such an interesting question. I started in science, and that was really important to me, and that probably has to do with family background and what I could do. But I realized very quickly that actually that intersection was going to be important to me. I originally was thinking more research, and then as I matured a little bit and understood kind of what drove me and where I get energy from people. And so it was really important for me to have those two pieces come together. And so I'm not sure I think myself a scientist. I do think myself more of a business leader in science. And to have the opportunity to work at Gilead and be part of something so much bigger than me is just a real privilege.
Let's talk about your personal motivation. You've spoken about losing your brother to cancer as a career turning point. Before that experience, what did success look like to you in this industry and how did it change afterward?
I was always very focused on the patient impact that I could be part of and be part of a broader team on this. And that was always very important to me. That was what was driving me. My brother passed of lung cancer in Canada, and you see some of the access inequities, the healthcare inequities. It brings out something really important for me, which was I don't want anybody else to go through what my brother had to go through. And I do think it just makes it so much more personal. And that's where I think people need to understand. And unless you've lived something like that, every day matters. And when they say, "Oh, I'll get to it next tomorrow," or "I'll get to it," if it has to do with access, if it has to do with getting the product, right? If you think about manufacturing and all the work that happens there, every day counts. It's making sure that if you put the patient in the room and you ask them what is the best thing that you can do for them, if that is your motivation, it becomes very personal. And that's what I think I really strive for, and I think that's what we do at Gilead every day.
How does that personal experience also alter the way you sit in a room where decisions are often being framed in terms of market size, margin, returns? I'm assuming that there are certain moments where maybe the financial case and the human case aren't perfectly aligned. So, how do you make decisions in that framework?
One of the things I've learned early on, and I actually had one of my managers that used to do this, and I've carried it through. If you're struggling with a decision, put a patient in the room, and I can guarantee you that decision will be very easy. And that's what we try to do every single day when those decisions are a little tougher. Generally, that's not the case. And it's maybe a small percentage of those decisions, but those are the most important decisions that you can ever make. And if you put the patient at the center of that, I guarantee you that decision is an easy one.
Yeah. Let's talk a bit about public trust and the perception there. I think that pharma leaders are often criticized, perhaps for being driven by shareholder pressure more so than patient need. At least that's a public perception. When you hear that, what feels unfair about it? And conversely, what might feel uncomfortably true?
I think that obviously, listen, we're a public company. The industry is obviously shareholder focused. There's no doubt we answer to shareholders, but we also answer to patients and the communities that we serve. And so I do think it's finding the balance of those two pieces is really important. And I think actually, if you prioritize the patients and the communities that we serve, you will automatically win with shareholders as well. Those two will come together. So it's about priority setting. As you talk about public perception, I find it a little frustrating sometimes because we should tell our story better. We should talk about what we did during COVID, how industry came together to really make a difference here, to help communities, to help patients in record time.
The public reaction to the killing of the United Healthcare CEO exposed a disturbing level of anger and vitriol toward healthcare leaders. How did that movement affect how you think about your role and again that trust gap between the industry and the public?
I think that it's really important in any organization, in any industry, to have the trust of the people you serve. And I think that's something we build every day. I do think this is something that we are very focused on. And by keeping the patient front and center, I think that's how you gain the trust and keep the trust of our communities, our patients, partners that we work with. That's how we need to continue to stay focused on our priorities, and our priorities are our patients.
You are working in an industry where so many products fail in development. How do you keep your teams motivated when you have this major internal North Star project get canceled? How do you lead through, I guess, that scientific heartbreak?
It is a scientific
Yeah.
heartbreak. We get very emotionally attached to the potential of what this can do for patients. And so it's happened many times, and you have to be ready for that. Development is a very arduous process, as you talk about. Lenacapavir took 17 years before we were able to get our first approval. That doesn't happen with a lot of work, a lot of sweat and tears along the way, and some failures along the way. And as much as you know that it can happen, you don't want it to happen, right? Because we want to get to those unmet medical needs that are out there. And we really want to be transformational in what we do. And efficacy is very important, but so is safety. And that's why it takes so much longer. But I do think that those wins are so incredibly inspirational that they negate some of the disappointments sometimes along the way. And usually a disappointment doesn't go without a lot of learnings so that you can build for the future of something else. So usually it's not just one and done. It's, okay, that didn't work, but what about this? And if you did it a little bit differently, could we find a solution here? So we never give up, and we make a lot of tough decisions in that transition as to, is it going to make the cut or not? Is there something there? Is that a mechanism of action that is new, different, can really meet the bar? And we have target product profiles that are very clear. We're not about incremental, we're about transformational at Gilead. And that's the key to making sure we hold the bar very high. And when we hit that bar, incredibly rewarding. And usually a disappointment doesn't go without a lot of learnings so that you can build for the future of something else.
Several U.S. companies have agreed to lower prices on major medicines in the U.S. Is Gilead among them?
Yes, we did sign an agreement with the administration.
And what was the decision-making process? Because I'm assuming there'll be, at least from the financial side, some near-term headwinds or shortfalls.
So what we've said thus far is to the street is that they'll be manageable, and we've quantified them for our shareholders and our investors. I do think it was important for us to make sure that we have a predictable and sustainable model. And that was what it was all about for Gilead, to make sure that we can continue to invest in innovation and drive that innovation to new medicines, transformational medicines. And that is something that is our mission and will continue to be our mission. And working with different administrations is really important for us to make sure we can have that predictability as we move forward.
Does price and reform actually make the company better, or does it simply make it more politically resilient?
I think that value recognition is really important, and not just in the United States, but every country around the world. And I do think there is an opportunity for us to make sure that that value for these innovative medicines gets recognized. GDP adjusted, of course, to those different countries. And there's different ways of going about that.
If policymakers are increasingly dictating drug prices, where does growth come from for Gilead?
Growth comes from innovation. It really does. It comes from education, awareness, and I think it's really important to highlight that there are options now for certain diseases. That's basically how you make sure patients come back into the market because they're frustrated. They've tried everything, nothing's worked. And so it's about bringing those innovations, but educating not just physicians, but patients to get into the physician's office, meeting them where they are to make sure they know that there are some options for them now. A lot of the role that my team does is all about that. It's education. of how to prevent, how to make sure that you test, you diagnose, and you link them to care where possible.
Yeah. Gilead has spent billions on acquisitions. What matters more to you now? Is it finding the next big asset, or is it showing that the company can extract value from the assets it already owns?
Yeah, so we've had a very clear strategy that we've set out just over about 5, 6 years ago. And that was really led by our CEO, Dan O'Day, and the team around diversifying a little bit the company, making sure people realize that HIV is a sustainable, both treatment and prevention is sustainable for the future, well into the 2040s, and really building out commercial and development execution. But the strategy is really quite clear about what we need to do. And it's about unmet medical need. It's about making sure that we bring these incredibly innovative medicines out, innovating ourselves every time.
As a leader, it can be very easy to fall into the sunk cost fallacy. So, whether you're working on a drug or you're making a multi billion-dollar bet that perhaps didn't pay off, how do you determine when to give it more time or whether to walk away?
Yeah, those are tough decisions.
Sure.
And they're not made individually, right? We really work as a team, as a leadership team, and through the organization. I think it goes back to something we talked about a little bit earlier around if you put the patient first, those decisions are a little bit easier. Safety is very important in clinical trial development. And I also think that as we think about where do we need to go, it goes back to that target product profile. It's what do the patients need and is it better than what they have today? And if can you push and raise the bar or do you need to kind of start over? And those are tough decisions. And sometimes we shelve things. We have different strategies for different assets. Sometimes it's all about speed. Sometimes it's about gating certain decisions until you have certain key achievements or milestones that you've met and then building off that.
How
Yeah.
often do you shelve things and then return back to it?
It's happened.
It does.
COVID-19 is a great example. A lot of the work that we do at Gilead in antivirals was originally for SARS, right, in, some 15 years ago. And then we brushed it off as soon as we started seeing kind of what was happening. And sure enough, we were able to see that, one molecule in particular, remdesivir, had incredible activity versus COVID-19. Those are the kind of things that we do to prepare, whether you think about diseases that are not necessarily diseases in first world countries, but Marburg disease. There's outbreaks all the time, Ebola. How do we think ahead to be proactive, to be part of the solution? And that's what Gilead strives to do every day, is being part of the solution.
Biopharma seems like a sector that is just so ripe for AI disruption.
Mm.
I'm assuming that it's already transforming drug development. Where has it actually made a measurable difference at Gilead?
Yeah, so at Gilead, we've been really purposeful about AI. Of course, we try pilots and we're thinking about different things, but we're also thinking about two pieces. One is really around making sure everybody is at the level, because everybody has different levels, including myself, of AI proficiency.
And that entails doing what? To bring them all to us.
So here's what we've done. Training, obviously, but we've also equipped every single employee, so over 17,000 employees, with Copilot so that they can use it. So they've been trained, because it's a highly regulated environment, to use it appropriately, but to use it on a daily basis. And the initial work there is more about, menial tasks and to make them more efficient, to give them more time to be more strategic, or maybe even more time to be with their families or friends, or maybe get a workout in at the end of the day. And so all of that is happening at the same time as we're thinking more strategically about AI and thinking about user cases, whether it's in research with lab assistants to try to go a little faster. I wish I could tell you it's going to, AI is going to help us find the next cure to cancer. I don't think we're there yet, but I do think.
How far out do you think we are if you're looking through your crystal ball?
Yeah, I wish I had that. I think the platform and software and computers are not yet equipped to be able to do that. And so we're probably a little bit out there, but I also think we can speed things up. Can we use AI to target our clinical trial sites so that we get to the patients as quickly as possible where those geographies are probably more prevalent with that disease, for example? Could we move a little faster in leveraging AI to turn around our, from data generation to filing and approvals to get access? It goes back to that speed to patient. Or from the commercial world, can we leverage it to be more targeted and customer focused? And so to really address the needs of the stakeholders that we are talking to every day.
And are you doing that currently and seeing a material difference of where it's really moving the needle?
Yeah, so we actually in commercial, we started a project a couple of years ago, leveraging AI through a decision-based model, and we called it Leapfrog. The whole concept was leapfrogging the competition. And we started small and we started more as a pilot, but we actually have seen real impact when what we help is our field teams to have the next best action. So we basically suggest to them, kind of what would be the next best thing to do with your customer. And and we've seen actually a lift off that because people are more targeted instead of one size fits all. It's what's the right approach for that one customer. And so we've really seen a difference. And now we got to take it to the next level as to what we can do with that. We still believe that our field teams, for example, in this scenario, are the quarterbacks. They get to make the final decision. AI doesn't drive it. And I think that human component is going to be really important, especially in our industry, to make sure that always is the leader of the decision, because you never want AI to take that over.
Perfect segue. What does responsible and ethical AI use look like for you at Gilead?
Yeah, I think it's really important, right? We're highly regulated. I think it's probably important in any industry. But I think it has a lot to do with just making sure people understand that the data is confidential, for example, that there is closed systems and certain data, you can't put data on the web, for example. But you can, by using Copilot and making sure that it's accessible to everybody, you can actually leverage the web data to advance and speed up and be more efficient.
I think we're still in the nascent stages here, but I often hear executives talk about the use case for AI around predictive analysis, anything predictive.
Yep.
I'm assuming in your industry it would be predictive medicine. But what is the difference between something like predictive medicine and corporate surveillance? How do you kind of balance that tenuous line?
For us, the example I gave you earlier is really around predictive analytics and kind of helping kind of guide the decision making as well. And I think those are important pieces, but I think the human judgment is also really important and it needs to basically supersede those pieces. So I think it's important not to lose the human behavior piece of the puzzle and not just trust what the system is telling you. And I think that, we have an incredible team at Gilead, both our researchers, our scientists, and making sure that we leverage it, but it doesn't drive the decision making.
Yeah. You're in an industry that's presumably more mission driven than others.
Sure.
What's your leadership philosophy? How do you get them to invest in your vision?
Yeah, I think it's really important to set that vision and inspire fellowship. And so it's all about that. How you do that, for me, it's been about building trust. It starts there and creating the pathway to meet the vision and the steps to meet it. So it's about vision, it's about strategy, it's about that structure of the team and the right people to deliver against that strategy. And it's also about holding people accountable. So it's about empowering them, but holding them accountable to what we need to deliver against and why we need to do it. You're right. I think when you talk about patients, it's easy to get people to understand the urgency of the work that they do and the importance of the work that they do. But it has to connect with them. And so you have to make it real. And it's not just about the science or the pill or the medicine itself. It's more about the impact that you can have. So if you can link it all the way to the impact that we can have and then show results of that impact along the way, that's incredibly rewarding. So it's about making sure we're together on the journey every step of the way.
So, what gets you excited these days? Where's the white space?
Yeah, I think the white space is being part of something bigger. I've never had the opportunity in my career to work on something that could actually have a global public impact. I've worked on incredible medicines that brought so much hope and overall survival for people, and that's incredibly rewarding. This is bigger than that. It's bigger than me. It's bigger than Gilead. This is about ending HIV, a disease that is not gone. And so we need to make sure that we, together with so many partners and advocacy, test, diagnose, link them to care, and prevent anybody who's at higher risk, and normalize HIV prevention. And that's what Gilead is absolutely trying to do. I think we now have the tools to do it with something every 6 months where you get 100% compliance for those 6 months and 99.9% efficacy. I mean, that's where I think we have a real opportunity now to end HIV, and I want to be part of that.
Absolutely. Well, let's end with some rapid fire questions
Sure.
if we can. What is the best advice and the worst advice you've received or seen or heard about managing your career?
I'm a big believer that breadth and depth of experiences are really important. It's gotten me to where I am. I don't think you have to have all the answers. I think you have to have the best team. So surround yourself with really strong people, people that don't necessarily think the way you do or agree with everything you say and can challenge you. I think that's really important. And that's been really good advice that I've gotten along the way that I've carried through. And from a worst advice about my own career is don't think about the next title. If somebody tells you about just think about your next promotion, I think that's the worst advice somebody can give you.
Explain.
I think you should be thinking about the next development opportunity, the next opportunity to have impact. That's how you're going to strive. That's how you get the breadth and depth of opportunities that you might create then the bigger roles. But I think people run after titles and I think that's to their detriment. And I think it's okay to take step backs. I have where I thought the development opportunity was greater than the next promotion. And I think that's a really important piece of the puzzle as you think about growing your career.
Are
So
breadth and depth both equally important throughout the career journey, or is it more so depth earlier in one's career and maybe breadth once you read the leadership levels?
I actually think it's important throughout your whole career because you can get it at different points. Breadth is actually easier earlier than it is later because you're more junior. And so you can try different things. As you get more senior in an organization, to go for breadth is going to be tougher. And I also believe in depth, where you have to see a couple of cycles of what you've done so that you can see the output and adjust, right, as you go forward. So both are important as you play that out and making sure you surround yourself with people that sometimes have those experiences along the way as well.
How do you recover from a career mistake or even a business mistake?
I think mistakes happen all the time. And actually, you recover by growing and learning from them. I think if you recognize the mistake and you share it, it becomes then a best practice instead of a mistake. You learn from it, you get insights from it. I'm a big believer you can make as many mistakes as you want. And actually, you should be making mistakes because that's how you grow. And that's how you try things. That's how you become, the innovator in your role. I do have a hard rule about not making the same mistakes twice. And so that's really important to me and my team that you learn from those mistakes and then you get stronger from them.
Final two questions here. You attended the University of Montreal.
I did.
If you could go back to your first day at the University of Montreal, what is the one piece of advice you'd give your younger biology self?
Probably take it a little more seriously at the first year of university. But I would say, there were some courses that I took that I really enjoyed and others less so. And I think I probably would give myself advice to find the good and kind of the build on some of those courses where I was less enthralled with what was going on, but kind of connect the dots a little bit more. I think as a leader, I think my job is connecting the dots across the organization and across really being an enterprise thinker. As I think about a student, we don't connect the dots. We just go from class to class to class. I wish I had this experience now going into it where I can connect the dots more. And they all connected, and you kind of feel that at the end of that 3-4 year journey, but you don't necessarily see it in the first year.
Let's end with this one. College grads are entering a completely different corporate landscape, certainly
Mhm.
than when I started. What is the number one skill you think current college students should start developing now to prepare for the workforce?
I think it's really interesting. I thought coming in, IQ was the most important thing. And of course, it's important to get the job and to be able to do the job that you're getting. But I'm actually a real believer in EQ and how that IQ EQ balance is more important than anything. So that human touch. And I would say early on in your career, think on both Don't just think one or the other. And EQ, you can develop that in college by doing different activities, by being thoughtful, listening. Those are easy, right? Being a good friend, being, a good son, daughter, etc. The EQ piece is more important than anything as you think about leadership. And it is something that I think is actually more important than IQ as you get in more senior roles. And so the balance shifts as you get into more senior roles. But if you don't have that, it is not something that is necessarily developed in those different career moves. It is something that is developed much earlier on in your life, your values, your family. And so it's something I would focus on more.
I think that's a solid place to end. Johanna, thank you so much for joining us on Fortune Next to Lead. I hope this discussion was one that was energy given rather than energy draining.
Absolutely. And it's such an honor to be able to share some of the great work that's going on at Gilead and how we're doing it. So thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for the work that you do.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Cheers.